So let's continue the show around news around the Dangote Industries Group. And we just take them one after the other. We started the show with the business combination being proposed between Dangote Sugar Refinery PLC, listed on the stock exchange, and the unlisted Savannah Sugar Company Limited. That would be a scheme of arrangement, a transfer of assets and liabilities. Dangote Sugar Refinery PLC will be the surviving company at the end of the business combination. That was an announcement yesterday to the marketplace. Then we had Dangote Refinery or Dangote Flour Mills PLC, which is being spinned off by Dangote Group to Olam, which is an unlisted agro-allied company. According to a notice sent to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, yesterday, about 6 directors of Dangote Flour Mills have left the board or have resigned with effective November the 1st. And Aso Egodalo, Thabo Mabe, Halima Aliko Dangote, Olakunle Aina, Arnold Ekpe, and Yabawa Lawan Wabi now out of the board of directors of Dangote Flour Mills PLC. In their stead, 4 new directors had been put in place effective October the 31st. So there's a major board changes or overhauling at Dangote Flour Mills PLC ahead as they get down to that, the sale of the company to Olam International. That's as far as that second company is concerned. But the big company within the Dangote Industry Group is the refinery. The multi-billion-dollar petrochemical refinery sitting at Lagos backwaters is continuing to receive support. Over the last 2 days, the Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources and the Group Managing Director of the NNPC visited the facility alongside other government officials, and they say they're supporting this project and it will be part of Nigeria's petrochemical ecosystem moving forward. Listen to this report.
Steady and surely, column by column, lines upon lines, machine movements, men at work, tons and tons of steel fitted and waiting to be fitted, and many more under construction work. This is the Dangote Refinery and Petrochemical Complex upscaling on work. So on this occasion, top management of the Ministry of Petroleum, the NNPC, NAPIMS, Department of Petroleum Resources, and other executives are here to assess the project by running a professional eye led by the Minister for State Petroleum.
Because we have a lot of goods that is supposed to come, but we are going to start using it now.
Arguably the busiest project around the world, 7 times the size of Victoria Island, billions of dollars in investment, 650 barrels crude oil processing daily when completed, propylene and propane from the petrochemical complex, a pipeline system, access road, tank storage facilities, marine terminal, a breakwater, jetty and harbor. The project is huge. After the tour and assessment, now to the verdict from the federal government.
In terms of support, it will be in the area of feedstock. We have to discuss with him whether it's gas or crude oil feedstock and offtake. Government will guarantee some of these things. But all this will come out of discussions with the president of the group.
Even more is the additional capacity that is on the way.
Not actually, we need more. We are going to do more. We are trying to put in some splitter units, or what we call the condensate refinery, to complement all this total about 200,000 barrels additional capacity that we're going to add. And probably in another 5 years, the 650 from the Dangote, 450, 445 from NNPC, and additional 200, you will see us, well above the 400 million barrels capacity processing.
And to the man undertaking this massive investment, just why is he doing this?
Number one, we believe in Nigeria. And number two, we know that if we don't do it ourselves, nobody will come down here and do it for us. There's a growth in population, almost 3% annually. So apart from this thing, Nigeria is supposed to actually feed the entire West and Central Africa, and that's what we are trying to do.
Dangote Oil Refinery is being developed by a wholly Nigerian-owned company, Dangote Group.
Also, back to that story all around Nigeria's land border closure. You heard earlier on the show what Nigeria's Honorable Minister in charge of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyema, set out as the steps to be taken by countries within the ECOWAS sub-region for Nigeria to reopen the land borders, which has been effectively closed since the middle of August. Executives within Nigeria's business space continue to bear their minds on this land closure and what it really means for Nigeria's security. And more broadly, the new EFCFTA. Temple Ashaju had this executive conversation with Abi Ayida, who is the chairman of Beja Paints, which listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Take a listen.
We made a push. We were actually going to invest in Ghana, and we were going to have an export market in there. And in the course of while we were deliberating on this and everything, the Ghanaian government came up with where every business has to actually deposit $500,000. That's an unexpected cost. It came out of the blue and everything, so we'll wait a little bit and see what happens. Those are just the sort of things that happen. I'm more concerned, for example, about the free trade agreement, because I think that on the business horizon, we need to be prepared, because we do know that there are forces in play that are viewing that free trade agreement as a means to dump, and it's something we need to be very aware of. And the people who have cost advantage have already positioned themselves in certain countries in Africa to be able to expand from there. And that would just be a conduit for European goods or Asian goods or anything to come in. That's why there was a little bit of pushback before it came up. And this is one of the things we need to look at. That is more concerning because we don't have unlimited amount of time to get it right here on the home front. We are now saying that not only are we not competing against our peers, what the free trade agreement does is that it means that we're competing against people who have comparative advantage to some of what it is, and they would have bridged the protection that there was, the natural protection that there was. It's not easy because what will happen is a lot of investors are going to be coming from offshore and they're going to be offering simpler way of doing it. You just act as our receiving at this end. We'll bring everything around and put it with you, and you use your distribution to get it. So it poses a risk for the domestic industry, and it's something we need to watch on.
And we heard the news this morning that the borders will be reopened sometimes in January.
And I think about 30 minutes later, Customs said, no, it will not be reopened. That's what I mean about we take everything that is said with a pinch of salt. Literally it was 30 minutes later, Customs released a statement that disregard the date. That is the environment we operate within.
So for how long do you think the borders should be shut?
To be honest, that's not the actual cause of the problem. You have to be able to secure your own border. Closing it is an admission that you cannot secure it. So you need to go and look at the reason why you can't secure the border. Because the second it's reopened, if the problem is you are unable to secure the border, then you have to find a means to secure it. Closing is a temporary measure. It causes so much dislocation that it's not sustainable. The truth is that it's going to impact on us, and it has probably seriously affected some business that depend on cross-border trade. It's a desperate measure, and I have to be frank, and it's usually sort of measure when you've run out of solutions and you actually don't want to make the hard decision that needs to be made, which is actually we have people and agencies that are charged with securing the border. If they can't secure the border, then you need to replace them with somebody who can. The solution is not to close the border. Honestly, that is my approach to business, that is my approach to life, is that if you can't deliver what you're supposed to do, you better find somebody who can. The solution is not to change everything around, the operating conditions around the person or the agents. The agent has to be able to deliver, or you need a better agent. So that's my solution to it, is that it's not sustainable. Whatever it is, those underlying reasons why they felt they had to take that measure are still going to exist in January. It may change, but the truth is that if the players don't change, they will just have different rules for the game, but the same game will still go on. I guess that's the only way I can allude to it.
And so your investors should be smiling to their banks by the first quarter of next year, given the impacts that the land border closure would have had on business.
That's why we're there.
With the
Well, I don't think it impacts us because we're mainly focused on the domestic market right now. We'll have to wait and see, but we have to ensure that we do our primary job very well, which is to actually make and deliver paint to our loyal customers and customers here in Nigeria, which is what we're focused on. So ultimately, unless our customers move across the border right now, they're still where we know they are, and we are still hopefully able to deliver to them. There are many other challenges. It's just one more challenge within. It will impact but luckily I don't think we imported anything through the land borders. But what it does, it gives you pause for thought for expansion into and taking advantage of the African Free Trade Agreement. So it hurts both ways. We will not be able to get our things out if we want to. So I'm not with the advocates that say, as long as it takes, keep it closed. Because the truth of the matter is that things are still getting through right now. But what you've just created is serious rent-seeking opportunities for these same agencies that have not been up and doing in terms of what they need to be doing. Every time you close one door, you need to be sure that another one has not been opened. That's why you have to deal with the reason why you're closing the door and face it, tackle it head on, as I said. If they're not good enough, get somebody better.
Temple Ashaju, in that executive conversation with the chairman of Beja Paints PLC, Abi Ayida, on Nigeria's land border closure and its impact moving forward into the new AfCFTA. So the Nigeria's capital market will be the big story this week, Thursday and Friday, by FMDQ Securities Exchange, making Nigeria a compelling case for the country as a destination for capital. Why is that important, and what does Nigeria capital market got to do with the broader economy? Kaudi Ugoje is an Associate Executive Director, and is joining us from FMDQ Securities Exchange, live here in our studios. It's good to have you.
Thank you for having
we get
me.
you folks from downtown, not
Thank
via
you,
Skype
Boston.
or whatever, to come into the studio, so I do love it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for coming. So, we're going to be making a big case, a big splash. I know that's what it is. Last year, it was like that.
Yes, the Gold
Yes,
Awards.
you had a big splash when it comes to this a conference about making a compelling case. What's the compelling case for Nigeria as a destination capital?
Thank you, Bosun. So yes, you're right that our last conference was actually in 2017, where we sort of focused on the debt capital markets, trying to, position our debt capital markets, for growth. And this year, we've decided to broaden it to talk about the capital markets, but more importantly, looking at Nigeria as a destination for capital. And that theme is twofold for us, sort of. It's a question and it's a statement. Is Nigeria a compelling destination for investment? And if it is, okay, great. What do we need to do to move further? If it isn't, what do we need to do to get it there? Do we have the potential? Are there opportunities? I think the answer is yes to all of these. And what we're trying to do at this conference is bring together market participants to discuss how we can move this forward, basically, using other countries as case studies.
I like that. So when we talk about a capital market conference, definitely all the big names will be there. And I'm looking at a lot of big names, of course, which includes the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. But in terms of the topics and discussions, I'm sure you're going to, the idea is to break down, look at the entire ecosystem of our market. What are some of these high points that you think are the pillars, as it were, for when you say a country is a destination for capital? Okay. What are the building blocks?
Okay, so for instance, one of the topics for discussion is on derivatives. How do we build a thriving derivatives market? If you want investors in your market, you have to provide them hedging options so that when they invest, they are not worried about either interest rate risk or exchange rate risk because they have derivatives to hedge. That's one of the things that we're looking at. How do we build the derivatives market? Another thing we're looking at is the full value chain of the securities transactions, from trading to clearing to settlement. How do you make it seamless? How do you position the market for gold based on our gold agenda, as we said? What are the things that we need to look at so that when someone comes into the market, from when they start to when they end, it's seamless and it makes the whole process easy? We're looking at other things like infrastructure.
I love that.
How do we?
It comes into two parts, and I
Yeah.
love that. The financial market infrastructure and infrastructure that I'm sure Mr. Vice President will be more interested in how the capital market can help.
Support,
That's on
correct.
one side. But let's talk about the financial market infrastructure.
Yes. Okay, so for the financial market infrastructure, so there are three, or there are several
Subsets
key
of that.
points, yes. But right now we're focusing on the trading, which is where the exchanges come in. So how do you trade? What are the, what do you need to put in place to make it, easy for people to access the market? How do you clear in the market? One of the things that FMDQ has is the FMDQ Clear, which is a clearinghouse, but also waiting for the rules on clearing counterparty for us to sort of offer counterparty services, which almost gives a guarantee in the market for the buyer and the seller. So it sort of reduces counterparty risk significantly. Now, one of the things that would hinder trading is when I'm not sure that my counterparty may settle, so I may not want to do trades with them. But if I have a third party who is saying, yes, we'll put things in place to ensure settlement, it makes that process easy. So more people are willing to trade. And then you look at the settlement process as well. Where do you hold your securities? Is it safe? Can you access your securities whenever you want it? So that's the full value chain of the FMIs, financial markets infrastructure, amongst others, reporting, payment systems, and others.
But I'm sure the bigger audience at home, those who are attending or not, will be looking at how do we get these capital market guys to support us in our infrastructure? I'm sure
Correct.
the government at the center and states will be looking to hear more about that.
Yes, and one of our topics is bridging the infrastructure gap through a private sector-led approach. So we're saying, do we need to, there's a capital market. If the private sector can access the capital market to raise funds, to invest in the infrastructural gaps that we have. So it's one of the key things that we're looking at the conference to say, how do we help grow the capital market? How do we help create that awareness and make it convenient and easy for people to access the market so that they can begin to do the projects that would help us to grow this infrastructure or to close the infrastructure deficit that we have. So that is a key point
I'm sure
for
the
us.
government would want to find out if you guys have some money or you can facilitate.
They're investors. Investors are willing to invest if you make the environment conducive for them. So yes, there are investors willing, local investors, foreign investors, but they also want to be assured of their investments. They don't want to invest and then, it goes down the drain tomorrow, which is why we need to put these building blocks in place now to ensure that when investors put their funds in, they are assured that, their funds are safe and they will get the returns as...
A few speakers will be coming from outside the shores.
Correct.
How did you come about selecting this pool of individuals to give us some of their experiences?
That's a good one, because one of the key focus for the conference is looking at country experiences. So we picked a couple of countries. We picked South Africa because, they're our neighbors in Africa, but they're quite developed. Their market is quite developed. They've gone through this process that we're going through. So we're getting someone from there to talk about that. Argentina as well. The person who's coming from Argentina is well versed in the South American economies.
Markets,
yes, so he has that broad experience, Brazil and co. So he's able to bring the experiences to us. And we have a financial market consultant from London who is a derivatives market subject matter expert who will also be talking about the derivatives side of things.
Great. Looks like a great team here and everything looks set. So see you on Thursday, then at the awards on Friday.
Correct.
I don't want to ask who's going to what awards, but if we get one, we don't mind. But I'm sure that's going to be for the big boys as well. Thank you.
That's
Cody.
for everybody who
Thank
deserves
you.
it.
Thank you for Cody.
Thank
Cody
you very
Ugoji,
much.
Associate Executive Director at FMDQ Securities Exchange for the National Capital Market Conference 2019. We're back after the break.